Hi, I'm here to do another Paul McCartney review. I've been doing his albums in order of release, and so we come now to Halloween of 1988, and I guess that's Choba B CCCP, which I believe means back in the USSR. This is a all covers album, covers of songs from the 50s and some from even earlier, and this came out in '88 in Russia, and then later '91, I believe it came out in America and England and the rest of the world. So there's a whole backstory as to this was released. I think the first batch in Russia sold out really quick, and those are worth quite a bit of money now. There was a second pressing that added a couple of songs. I think those are worth money too. Then when they came out in England and America, and I'm sure this is a American. Says it's under contract of EMI, so this is American, maybe British version that I have. I'm not going to get into all the backstory. You can look that up if you're interested because it gets sort of complex. My version is the sleeve is pretty flimsy. I don't know if that's the case with all of them. And the record itself is got this plastic bag. I really need to get a nice paper inner sleeve to trade out here. It's on the Melodia label of Russia, which I'm sure that this is the British or American version. That's just a reproduction of that label and not the original. You got the writing in Cyrillics on the back, so unless you can read Russian, you're not going to be able to make very much out of that. The song titles are in English, however. And so I think there is an 11-song version of this and a 13-song version. This is a 13-song version. And I think there's on the CD, there's even some extra songs because he recorded a whole lot of covers of old songs. So 1988, Paul's career was not at a high point. His last three albums or so had not done that well critically or sales wise. So that probably might have played into his decision to just do a covers album instead of taking the time to write new songs at that point in time. And also the thawing relations of the Cold War, Gorbachev and all that stuff going on. This was maybe just a gesture of goodwill from Paul on that part, on that front. And the idea of having this kind of marketed as a bootleg, in theory, even though it's an official release, the bit of fun behind that, I guess. But as to the album itself, well, I've never been a huge fan of cover songs for the most part. The Beatles did a lot of great covers. They sort of took songs. They didn't take songs that were overly familiar or overly played. They made good choices when they did their cover songs, and they sort of made them their own. In a lot of cases, they matched the original, or they even did better version than the original in some cases. And Rolling Stones did too, and some of the other 60s British bands, The Who and the Kinks and the Yardbirds to a lesser extent did some good covers early on. But most people, when they do a cover version, and not always, I mean, sometimes you get a good one, but most of the time they either just do a subpar version of the original or they do something that just pretty much a copycat of the original and just doesn't add anything to it. Sometimes you get something interesting like Devo doing Satisfaction where they take it in a different direction, and whether you like the song or not, you got to at least admit that they had some fun and did something different with it. But so this one sounds like Paul's having quite a bit of fun. He and the band that are playing these things sound like they're having fun, so that's a good thing. But in every instance on this, he doesn't better any of the original. I'll hold that there if you want to read the track listing, but he doesn't improve on any of the original versions of these songs. And I know things like That's All Right Mama, that Elvis wasn't the first person to do that, but he's the one that's, kind of the one that's known for doing it. And a million people have done Summertime and some of these other songs, but He doesn't improve on any of the originals, and he really doesn't match any of the originals. So I'm not going to go through and cover and rate these songs individually like I've done for most of the other albums, or all of the other albums actually. But I will kind of point out the highlights here. Cracking Up, I'm Gonna Be a Big Wheel, and he does a pretty good version of That's All Right Mama. It's not as good as Elvis's version, but it's good. That Elvis, that was the Sun Singles period, which was really the highlight of Elvis's career, in my opinion. But then again, like the worst would be Ain't That a Shame? Pretty bad version. Summertime is a great song, kind of hard to mess up, but Paul manages sort of just an antiseptic, sort of lifeless version of that. But Just Because is pretty good. Cracking Up, I'm Gonna Be a Big Wheel, and That's All Right. He does a good job on those, even though in none of those cases does he better the original or really even match the originals. But it does sound like he's having fun on this album. Head cover, by the way, which I think is kind of a pretty cool cover. Um, and This is a good album to play as a background album when you're just doing stuff around the house. It's not so bad. But really, when it comes down to it on this, it's sort of like you and your buddy go to a bar, drink some beer, and there's a band playing. Just sort of a okay, mediocre to okay local band that's up there on stage playing covers of old 50s songs. And, you know, they're having fun doing it, and it's okay. You know, you're drinking beer and they're playing back there, and it's nice to have some music going. But that's about it. I mean, and there's not a whole lot to recommend on this album. I'm gonna give this a 5 because it's pleasant enough, and Paul seems to be having fun, but he doesn't really bring anything new to any of these songs. The best song on this would be Cracking Up, in my opinion, followed by I'm Gonna Be a Big Wheel Someday. And then the two, That's All Right and Just Because, are pretty good. The rest of them are adequate and pleasant. Ain't That a Shame is not very good, and Summertime's not very good. Not whole lot else to say about this album. He does another covers album years later. We'll get to that when we get to that point in his discography. Pleasant album, nice background music. It doesn't add anything to the originals. Got a kind of cool cover. Got a kind of cool backstory about the whole only released in Russia originally and so forth. And some of these are worth a lot of money. I'm sure this is not one of the ones that is. It's a 5, and I will be back with the next Paul McCartney album when I'm back. I hope you all have a nice weekend, and we'll talk to you later.